Shabbat Shalom for the second time tonight. I am here with Michael, and we are continuing our study on the Genesis Targum. We're on chapter 12 this week, and it's a rather straightforward chapter. It's a story that everyone here is familiar with, and I, as always, don't really know what. I'm always pleased to have Michael here. I don't really know what he's going to be covering. I think he's going to surprise me tonight. Hopefully, we're not going to cover the same stuff. But I'll be covering it from the angle of the writings of Abraham. I told you guys that I try really hard to keep away from that text and not source it all the time, but it is such an awesome read. I love it, and I'm just trying to promote it to get more people to read it. But anyways, we're going to be um, starting tonight with that. Michael, would you like to start by reading tonight and then go straight into the first comment?
Sounds good. Shabbat shalom, everyone. So Josh will drop the link, hopefully, and I will start on chapter 12, Genesis Targum. So it says, And the Lord said to Abram, Go thou from thy land, separate thyself from thy kindred, go forth from the house of thy father, go into the land which I will show thee. And I will make thee a great people, and will bless thee, and magnify thy name. And thou shalt be blessed. And I will bless the priests, who will spread forth their hands in prayer, and bless the sons, and Biliam, who will curse them. I will curse, and they slay him with the mouth of the sword. And in thee shall be blessed all the generations of the earth. And Abram went, according as the Lord had spoken with him. And Lot went with him. And Abraham was the son of 75 years, at his going forth from Haran. And Abram took Sarah his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all the substance which they had acquired, and the souls whom they had proselytized in Haran, and went forth to go to the land of Canaan. And they came to the land of Canaan. And Abram passed through the land unto the place of Shechem, unto the plain which had been showed. And the Canaanites were then in the land, for the time had not yet come that the sons of Israel should possess it. And the Lord was revealed unto Abram, and said, To thy sons will I give this land. And he builded there an altar before the Lord, who was revealed to him. And he went up from thence to a mountain which was eastward of Bethel, and outspread his tent, having Bethel on the west, and Ai on the east. And he builded there an altar before the Lord, and prayed in the name of the Lord. And Abram migrated, going and migrating unto the south. And there was famine in the land. And Abraham went down into Mitzrayim to be a dweller there, because the famine was strong in the land. And it was as he approached to enter the limit of Mitzrayim, and they had come to the river, and were uncovering their flesh to pass over, that Abraham said to Sarah his wife, Behold, until this I have not beheld thy flesh, but now I know that thou art a woman of fair aspect. It will be, therefore, when Mitzrayim see thee, and view thy beauty, that they will say, This is his wife, and they will kill me, and thee will keep alive. Say, I pray, that thou art my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake, and that my life may be spared on thy account. And it was when Abram had entered Mitzrayim, the Mitzrayim saw the women to be fair. And the princes of Pharaoh beheld her, and praised her to Pharaoh. And the woman was conducted to the royal house of Pharaoh. And Pharaoh did good to Abraham for her sake, and he had sheep and oxen and asses and servants and handmaids, and she-asses and camels. And the word of the Lord sent great plagues against Pharaoh and the men of his house on account of Sarah, Abram his wife. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, What is this thou hast done to me? Why saidst thou, She is my sister? When I would take her to me to wife, plagues were at once sent against me, and I went not into her. And now, behold, thy wife, take her and go. And Pharaoh commanded men concerning him, and they led him forth, and his wife, and all that he had. That is Genesis chapter 12, Palestinian Targum. I noticed a lot of KJV in that. I'm surprised. It sounds like a little KJV. So I'm going to do a little bit different today. In honor of our brother Rob, I will be posting a lot of comments in the chat. So it'll give you guys a chance to kind of see what I'm reading. So I found a lot of good stuff. I didn't go in the writings of Abraham, so there won't be that exact thunder, but I'm sure there'll be some cross there. Okay, so before I get going, I want to reiterate one verse in last week's reading, and that is Genesis 11:31. Maybe I'll just put it here. Oh, Sarah, that is Rob, breath of Yah, not Skiba. Okay, so, and Terah took his son Abram and his grandson Lot, son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarah, his son's Abram's wife, and they went out with them from Ur Kasdim to go into the land of Canaan. And they came to Haran and dwelt there. Okay, so with this in mind, so I'm going to be reading a lot from Jubilees 12 tonight. It gives a lot of detail in Abraham's life at this moment. So this is my first image. No, no, he did not die. Sorry, Rob. Okay, so Jubilees 12. So I'm going to read the highlighted versions. You guys could read the rest, but it says, and behold, and he said, "Behold, here I am, my son." And he said, "What help and profit have we from these idols which thou dost worship, and before which thou dost bow thyself? For there is no spirit in them, for they are dumb forms and misleading of the heart. Worship them not." So Abraham's talking to his father about these idols that they're worshiping. "Worship the God of heaven, who causes the rain and the dew to descend on the earth, and does everything upon the earth, and has created everything by his word, and all life is from before his face." Abraham again continuing, "Why do you worship things that have no spirit in them? For they are work of men's hands. And on your shoulders do ye bear them. And ye have no help from them, but they are a great cause of shame to those who make them. Misleading of heart to those who worship them. Worship them not." And his father answers and says, "I also know it, my son, but what shall I do with a people who have made me serve before them?" And then continues, "Keep silent, my son, lest they slay thee." And these words he spake to his two brothers, and they were angry with him, and he kept silent. So this is very important, guys. Like Terah's basically doing what that city is telling him to do, or the government is telling him to do, and he's bowing down and worshiping these idols. We're supposed to trust the Father and rebuke them like Abraham did. Okay, so this is a commentary, a little midrash on that. Here we go. So it's a midrash on the early years of Abraham. So again, I'm just trying to give context. These were cool stories on the reason why. Like, why did he leave his father? I read in chapter 12:1 that he left, but this is giving more context. So Abraham's father Terah, as a god merchant, he had an idol factory where their family made statues. Sometimes he set up a stall in the market to peddle the divinities. One day, when it was young, Abraham's turn to mind the shop, a woman came in holding a dish of grains. Turning to Abraham, she said, "Take this food and serve it to other gods," and left. Instead, Abraham took hold of a large stick and ran around the place, smashing stones as he went. When he had finished, Abraham put the stick in the hands of the largest idol and sat down to admire his work. Terah was shocked to see all the merchandise in shards. "Who did this?" And Abraham said, "Father, I must tell you what happened. A woman came to the store bearing a meal for the idols. Naturally, I brought the food over to them. You know how these gods are. They started fighting amongst themselves, each one trying to get the food first. Well, the scene turned ugly, and this biggest idol took a stick and smashed all the other gods." Who are you? And then Terah doesn't believe it. "Who are you trying to kid? Idols can't shout and kill. They're only stone carvings." Abraham said, "Does your ear hear what your mouth speaks? What are you worshiping? How can you worship that which doesn't see or hear what you call them? Do you any good?" But his father only replied, "It's the way of our forefathers." So it's very similar to Jubilees, gives a little bit more context. Abraham was using sarcasm or reverse psychology. He caught his father trying to play along, and he got him. He basically did the same thing as Jubilees. It was pretty cool. Okay, so the apocalypse of Abraham gives their take on this part. So apocalypse of Abraham, I believe that's what Nolan's ended a few times ago. I don't know. But basically, they told Abraham to argue his father Terah that fire is more worthy of honor than idols because its flames mock perishable things. Even more worthy of honor was water because it conquers the fire and satisfies the earth. He called the earth more worthy of honor because it overpowers the nature of water. He called the sun more worthy of honor because its rays illumine the whole world. But even the sun Abraham did not call God because at night and by clouds it obscured. Nor did Abraham call the moon or the stars God, because they are also in this season obscure their light. Abraham argued to his father that they should worship the God who made everything, including the heavens, the sun, the moon, the stars, and the earth. And while Abraham thus spoke this to his father in the court of his house, the voice of God, Bathkol maybe, came down from heaven in a fiery cloudburst, crying to Abraham to leave his father's house so that he would not also die in his father's sins. Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed the context on what I'm about to read on Genesis 12:1. So it says, Now the Lord had said unto Abraham, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. So, you know, Masoretic doesn't really tell you why he had to do that. Continuing on Jubilees 12, short this time. Oh, geez. Pull out the specs. Um, sorry about that. And in the 60th year of the life of Abram, that is the fourth week in the fourth year thereof, Abraham arose by night and burned the house of the idols. He burned all that was in the house, and no man knew it. And they arose in the night and sought to save their gods from the midst of the fire. I see Seinfeld. And Haran hasted to save them, but the fire flamed over them, and he was burnt in the fire, and he died in the Ur of Chaldees before Terah his father. And they buried him in the Ur of Chaldees. And again, Genesis 11, Masoretic doesn't say how he died. So, but Jubilees does. I've already said a lot. I'm going to stop just on one and hand off to Noah. You feel free to go further than one if you need to.
Yeah, I'll be addressing this in a little bit different way. I don't think we'll be trudging on each other too much tonight. Um, I have a few points starting out, not a lot. So let's look at the beginning here, and we see that Abraham is leaving Nimrod city, and he's leaving Babel, and he's going to uh, Canaan, to the promised land. And what's interesting is that in the writings of Abraham, it talks about when he left from Canaan to go to Babylon to confront Nimrod and his father. And this is what we read in the morning before entering the city. So he is about to enter the city of lights, where Nimrod is, and this is where he'll go through the whole episode of being thrown into the fiery furnace, and he converts many people there, and he also meets Sarah, his wife. I gathered my family together, consisting of my 7 wives, dun dun dun, my 50 daughters, my 12 adopted sons, and 350 men servants whom Shem had sent with their families, being in all 6,370 souls. So, according to this, he traveled to his father's house from the school of Shem, from Mount Zion, with 6,370 souls. I don't know if he includes himself in that. That's interesting that there's the number 70 again. You see that a lot. He already had 7 wives. Yeah, that's a whole another debate that, I'm not trying to trigger anyone. But he had 50 daughters, and I want you to notice this, that he has no sons. Like, every single wife is giving him a daughter. Can you imagine Abraham with 50 daughters running around? He's like the little lady with the shoe, but he's like a bunch of girls running around in dresses and falling out windows and all that kind of stuff with grubby faces, and I just can't imagine that. But 12 adopted sons, and that's really interesting about one of the themes of the writings of Abraham, which it also ties in with Genesis, but it really enhances this idea of what was this inheritance going to look like? Because, and I was already covering this in the Roman study, that uh, Paul calls it uh, faith beyond faith, I think is how he phrases it, where it's like, how in the world was this guy going to end up having, this inheritance of having a whole nation be blessed by him, and all the people being blessed by him through his seed, if he's not delivering this heir he's supposed to have? Like, and every single step along the way, it seems like his efforts are being frustrated. Can you imagine having 50 daughters, and every one you're hoping it's the boy, and it's like, nope, it's another girl. And I'm not uh, uh, advertising disappointment, because, as you guys know, I just had a daughter a couple months ago. It was like one of the greatest things ever. I mean, I think every father should have a daughter. Daughters are amazing. And if you don't have a daughter, then have your son marry a woman so you could have a daughter, and make sure he treats her right, because daughters are really amazing. So anyway, so once he leaves, he leaves. Then he leaves with his whole father's household. We see that. We're going to see, I think, in a while, that his father was still worshiping idols. That was a problem. He never gave up on the idols, but he left with Sarah. And I'll be talking more about her tonight specifically, especially as we get into Egypt. Now, another interesting point, a difference between the Genesis, whether the Masoretic or the Aramaic Targum account with the writings of Abraham, is that we see Abraham going straight back to Mount Zion. So this is what we read. When at length we arrived in the city of Shalom. The city of Shalom is the original Yerushalayim. Father Shem came forth to greet us, bearing bread and wine, which he blessed and gave to us. And he said unto me, Blessed art thou, Abram, for the Most High Elohim hath multiplied thee, and behold, thy seed shall be even as the sand upon the seashore without number. And again, he's blessing him here, and it's like Abram's like, okay, well, I got 50 daughters, and I got they're all being married off into other tribes, so I'm not getting credit for that. And where's this child going to come? You see the 12 again, the 12 adopted sons. He wanted to give the kingdom to any one of them. We'll also see later on that Eliezer, who is the son of Nimrod, he wanted to give the kingdom to him, and every single time Yahuwah was like, "Nope, not going to happen." And anyway, so this is what Shem says: Go to now with this great multitude in the land of Canaan, for unto thee and thy seed will I give this land for an everlasting inheritance, saith Yahuwah Elohim Almighty. Amen." And I pointed out before that I actually believe that by this time that Shem was immortal. He was resurrected. He was, you could say, one of the sons of Elohim. He was a Melchizedek, and that this school, the school of Shem on Mount Zion, was like a supernatural school. There was something very. It doesn't really connect with our modern scientific world that we live in now, how we think, but I think there was something very supernatural about it. All right, so we see then that he goes on to, where does he go to next? Well, we'll read here. Um, uh, he passed in the key. Oh, he went to Shechem, and I had talked about Shechem in my presentation on the Stone of Scone, and so this is some of what we read about Shechem. And see, we're going to find out how long he was there as well. For 3 years. He was there for 3 years. All right. So here's some of what we read about it. We read that Joshua or Yahushua built an altar there at Shechem. Also, in a little while, the Dinah would be raped there, and she would bear forth a Aseneth as a child. That is where the men were circumcised and killed off. And later on down the road, it's where Yahushua would later write the Torah on an altar before all of Yasharel, presumably the same altar which Abraham had erected that we saw him erect here. So this is what it says. Then Yahushua built an altar unto Yahuwah Elohai of Yasharel in Mount Gerizim, as Moshe, the servant of Yahuwah, commanded the children of Yasharel, as is written in the Sefer of the Torah of Moshe, an altar of whole stones over which no man has lifted any iron. And then it goes on to say how the Ark of the Covenant was there as well to witness it. We read this a little bit later on down the road. And Yahushua wrote these words in the Sefer of the Torah of Elohim, and took a great stone and set up there under an oak that was by the sanctuary of Yahuwah. And this same oak tree is where Abraham Yahuwah revealed himself to Abraham in this text. And then we also see that the bones of Yosef, interestingly enough, were buried there at Shechem. So some little fun little comments. And for a time, the tabernacle was there as well before moving on to Shiloh and eventually Yerushalayim. Um, so Abraham, as I mentioned, was there for 3 years, and this is what it says in the writings of Abraham. Thus we departed from the presence of Shem and moved into the vicinity of Ludor, which city we denominated Haran. And we dwelt in the suburbs there of Haran for 3 years, for there was much pasture there and space large enough for the multitude which accompanied me. And I preached the gospel in Haran, and many souls were added unto the faithful in that place. Now, um, it's interesting that Abraham's entire life, he was a minister. And what we see in his life is that he was, even when going to Egypt, I'll be showing you later on why he went specifically to Egypt. It wasn't just a drought. He was targeting specific people groups. And you could really see where Abraham has the heart of Mashiach, specifically later on when he plants his community right on the road to Sodom and Gomorrah. Now that doesn't happen this chapter; it'll happen probably in a few weeks from now. But this was the road that led to Sodom. He could overlook the city. In fact, we see that he does when it's going up in smoke, and the first thing he does is runs out there to see it. He don't want to see the city burn, and you really see the heart of this guy that he's like he's pleading with people as they're going on the road to or from to repent of their sins and turn to the Most High and be baptized. So that's really just interesting to watch how he conducted his business, lived his life. He was obviously a very successful businessman, I'm sure, with all that cattle and stuff he had, but he always did it under the with the determination to bring people over to the Most High. And with that, because I'm going to be going off on a whole different tangent next time, I'm going to hand it back over to Michael.
All right. I will pick up on 2. So, one of the best verses, and I will make thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I want to put Jubilees 12 again. As big a glass as needed. But so 22 and 23 expands a little bit. I'll bless thee, make thy name great. I really want to focus on 24, 25, and the rest. So, and I will be a God to thee, and thy son, and thy son's son, and to all thy seed. Fear not from henceforth, and unto all the generations of the earth. I am thy God. And the Lord God said, here it is. Open his mouth and his ears, that they may hear and speak with his mouth, with the language which has been revealed, or had ceased from the mouths of all the children of men from the day of the overthrow of Babel. And I opened his mouth and his ears and his lips, and I began to speak with him in Hebrew, in the tongue of the creation. He took the books of his fathers, and these were written in Hebrew, and he transcribed them, and he began from henceforth to study them. And I made known to him that which he could not understand, and he studied them during the 6 rainy months. Wow, so much more detail. Brings back in the Hebrew, books written in Hebrew that he scribed, Abraham scribed. Could this be the writings of Abraham? I don't know. Okay, so number 3, it says, I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. Not many word studies today, but this one was a cool one. Psalms, what are we doing here? Psalms 144, or 145:1. I will exalt you, my God, the King, and I will bless your name forever. That's the same word. So Yahuwah blesses thee. And then David, it appears, to try, is revering, showing reverence to the Father, blessing him, your name forever and ever. But what's really cool is the Palestinian. So this exact verse, read that. He says, and I will bless the priests who will spread forth their hands in prayer. So in the Masoretic, it's strictly just Yahuwah and Abraham. But, we're in the Abraham's promise. We are supposed to be kings and priests. And the Palestinian says, if you're in that covenant, he will bless the priests who spread forth their hands in prayer, and bless thy sons. And then it continues, and Biliam, who will curse them? I will curse, and they will slay him with the mouth of the sword. And in thee shall be blessed all the generations of the earth. I didn't go much into Biliam, but I wanted to point that out, that, this is part of Abraham's promise. Yahuwah is blessing him. But then the Palestinian says he will bless the priests who will spread forth their hands in prayer. Praise Yah. Okay, now that I just mentioned that Abraham's promise. There's many interpretations of how long the promise is and how many different things. These are 6 things I found. Obviously, there could be way more. But so Yah appeared to Abraham when he lived in Ur, and told him to leave his country and his kindred and his father's house and go to a land that he would show him. He made the first of number of promises to Abraham. He would make him a great nation. He would bless Abraham. He would make Abraham's name great. Abraham would then be a blessing. Yah would bless those who blessed Abraham and curse those who cursed Abraham. In Abraham, all the families of the earth will be blessed. Praise Yah. Okay, so another commentary I thought was really good. Told you, a lot of comments. This one has a little color. Okay, so first, the Almighty, like the Good Shepherd, called Abram by name and led him out of Ur and then Haran. Second, Abram knew the shepherd's voice and followed him. This is similar to Yahusha, right? With great faith, trusted in confidence. Sound familiar? So the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. He brings out his own sheep. He goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. Abraham obeyed by faith. Hebrews 11:8. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he received as an inheritance, and he went out not knowing where he was going. So Abraham's obedience was from the heart of the Father and the heart of the one he chooses must be as one. When Yahuwah reveals what's on his heart, the one of faith receives it. Praise Yah. And that context that I shared earlier. He believed before that. He believed way before that. He knew what he was doing. He knew what God he was serving way before that, and he got rid of the idols. All right, I'll do one more, then hand off to Noel. Number 5, it says, and Abram took Sarah his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran, and they went forth to go into the land of Canaan, and into the land of Canaan they came. All right, more pictures, no color. These are good. So he began from the Ur of Chaldeans, or Babylon, and this is from this old dictionary, probably before they started screwing with history, maybe. Ur, light or the moon city, the birthplace of Haran, principal commercial center of the country as well as the center of political power. It stood near the mouth of the Euphrates, and it represented by mounds of bricks, cemented by bitumen. We talked about that last week. Here was the port of Babylon, whence trade was carried on with distant countries. It was home to the famous temple of the moon god Sin. It shared this honor, however, with another city, and this city was Haran. The temple of the moon god at Haran was perhaps even more famous in the Assyrian and Babylonian world than the temple of the moon god at Ur. At any rate, these two cities were bound together by the worship of the same deity. So Terah should have migrated from Ur to Haran, therefore ceases to be extraordinary. If he left Ur at all, it was the most natural place to go. It was basically just going from one court of a temple to another. It just kind of describes what they were leaving and what those idols were. These were actual gods that they were worshiping. Okay, so again, I'm breaking records here. Get out your glasses. According to Midrashic literature, Abraham called people to, and this was pretty cool. Obviously, if it's not true, it's okay. Abraham called people together in public meetings in Haran to proclaim the truth about the one Creator and to encourage the people to serve him. After these public meetings, he was willing to debate his claims with anyone that questioned him. In this way, he won thousands of followers who confessed the existence of the Creator Elohim. Praise Yah, like all those apologetic people that go out there. Even Paul did it. They would go and they would hear all the arguments and debate them, and they won people over. Praise Yah. Okay, so this will be the last thing I share, and I'll hand off to Noel. This just shows highlighter. This is Abraham's journey. So if you see Ur right there, he traveled to Haran, River Euphrates, and Babylon, and then he came down Shechem, Bethel, Ai, Hebron, Sodom, went to Egypt, and then he's going to head back. Okay, that's his route. But still have a lot more, but I'll hand it off to Noel.
Well, what I don't want to do is jump too far ahead of you. And one of the things I'm going to present tonight is how beautiful Sarah truly was. And so I'll save that for the next round. So I don't have a lot to give this time without jumping too far ahead again. What I wanted to show is how Abraham was targeting specific people to spread the message. And so this is kind of interesting. And remember now that this generation of people, they were not that far removed from Noah and his three sons. I mean, they still all have this identity that they were the sons of Japheth, Ham, and Shem. And so listen to what this says here. And this is he's Abraham. He's getting ready. He's going to Egypt, and he hasn't entered yet. But this is what he says. Now I had heard while I dwelt in Haran that some of the seed of Eber had entered into Egypt and driven the seed of Ham to the south and taken possession of the land. But these followed not after the Elohim of their father Eber, but worshipped idol Elohim, even as did my father Terah. And we see that in the writings of Abraham, it says that his father Terah never repented. Uh, he appeared to worship idols to the end of his days, but they followed not after the abominations of Nimrod. So it's beneficial that he's saying that these children of Shem through Eber, they followed idols, but not the abominations of Nimrod. They weren't that far gone. Now, these Hebrews were of the seed of Hadaram, the son of Yoktan, the son of Eber, and Yoktan was the brother of Peleg. And Eber was the son of Salah, the son of Arphaxad, the son of Shem. Wherefore Yahuwah had sent me to preach the gospel unto these who had departed from the Elohim of their fathers. So essentially, it says that these people were of Shem and they had already departed from the Elohim of their fathers, and Abraham was going to preach the gospel unto them. It's just so I love it. I love seeing him go around, and that's his whole purpose statements, and that he's actually targeting where he's going to live based on who he can talk to. I don't know if that's ever something we consider when we, where we're going to move, where we're going to go. Is it like somewhere where we can strengthen certain people and have an effect on people? And obviously, that was what Abraham was after. Now, like I said, I want to start talking about Sarah specifically, and how she going more in depth into how she is involved in the story of Abraham seeing her ankles in the river and going, "Uh-oh, we're in trouble." So I'm gonna hand it back to you, Michael, and then I'll hit this up the next round.
All right, sorry about that. So I have a big gap, so I'm going to do 7 and 9, and then I don't have anything until the end. So, and I have a lot at the end, but I'll do 7 and 9 and then hand it back to you, and you can talk about Sarah. Okay, so 7, it says, and this is the KJV, and Yahuwah appeared unto Abram and said, Unto thy seed will I give this land, and there builded he an altar unto the Lord, who appeared unto him. And so another word study, I don't have many, but this might be the last one. Genesis 35:1. Then Yahuwah said to Jacob, Arise, and I'm talking about who appeared. Who appeared is the word I'm looking at. Then Yahuwah said to Jacob, Arise, go up to Bethel and live there, and make an altar there to God, who appeared, same word, to you, fled from your brother Esau. So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, Remove the foreign gods which are among you, and purify yourselves and change your garments. Very similar to Abraham. So not only were they fleeing kindred, were they fleeing their family, like Esau here and Abraham. They were moving foreign gods. They purified themselves, changed their garments. Yahuwah appeared to them, and they both made an altar. So it's very similar. So the Abraham and Jacob story, and I'll be talking way more on that comparison later. So if you've been with us for over the last 2 months, I've been talking about chiastic structure a lot. And so Abraham had 10 trials. And I want to add the chiastic structure of those trials. How cool it is. It's processing on my end. There it is. Okay, so Genesis 12, 1 through 7. It says, Go from your country, leave his father, blessings and promises. Next chapter, Genesis 13. Sarah is in danger from Pharaoh. A sanctuary is founded at Bethel, and the name of the Lord is proclaimed. Continuing on that chapter, Lot goes away. Genesis 14 and 15. Lot is in jeopardy and is saved. Genesis 16 and 17. Threat to the birth of the firstborn, birth of Ishmael, covenant to be fulfilled through the second son. Okay, now on the way back. Covenant of circumcision, birth of Isaac foretold. Lot is in jeopardy and is saved. Similar. Sarah is in danger from Abimelech. Sarah was in danger for Pharaoh. Hagar and Ishmael go away. A sanctuary is founded at Beersheba, and the name of the Lord is proclaimed there. So, same with Sarah in danger. Sanctuary is founded. Name of the Lord is proclaimed there. And then Genesis 22. Go to the land of Moriah. Bid Pharaoh to his sons blessings and promises. So again, go to your country. Leave his father blessings and promises. So chiastic structures are just amazing, and I just want to share that. Okay, so number 9. So, and Abram journeyed, going on still towards the south. Okay, so we haven't gotten to the name change yet. That goes later, and I've slipped and called him Abraham a few times. But I'm going to pull up Jeff Benner. This is usually my go-to on the names. So, while many suggest that Abraham means exalted father, and Abraham means father of multitude, both names, in fact, mean exactly the same thing. Father lifted up or exalted father. The beginning of both names is Ab, meaning father. The ram in Abraham is meaning lifted, a parent root. So the Raham in Abraham also means lifted. a child root derived from the parent root. Again, some scholars will say they mean two separate things. Jeff Benner's making the case that they both mean the same thing. What do you guys make about that? Like I said, I'm bottom heavy. I put the rest under verse 20, and I'm going to be talking. I'll give you guys a little preview. I'm talking about the sister narratives. I will talk about the Masoretic and Septuagint difference, and the, the cross referencing between Abraham and what he went through and the Israelites and the similarities. But I will tease that and hand off to Noel.
All right, well, that sounds really good because what I'm going to do is probably go ahead and give a little presentation here on Sarah, and that will end most of the commentary I have on this. So that'll be a nice switch over. So here's the scene that's unfolding. It says this in Genesis 12, verse 11. And it was as he, Abraham, there I doing some serial slipping tonight. I should be calling Abram. But as he, Abram, approached to enter the limit of Mizraim, and they had come to the river and were uncovering their flesh to pass over. So what does that mean to uncover their flesh? I think you guys can all picture this, that they're, Sarah would be lifting her dress up, kind of rolling it maybe, so to speak, it's showing her ankles. Maybe we don't know how deep this river is. It went up to her legs, knees, whatever, and she's unrolling it to step in and not wet her dress. And the same thing with Abraham, his garments. He's showing off his shiny, hairy legs. We don't know if they got a lot of sun. Maybe they're a little pale, whatever. And he's crossing, and he looks over, and he sees her flesh, and he says, "Behold, until this I have not beheld thy flesh, but now I know that thou art a woman of fair respect." So, or aspect. So this has long been commented on, that it's like, really? Like, you haven't, what's been going on, Abraham? Like, how many years have passed now that you've known her, and you haven't beheld her flesh? So, there's a lot of questions on that. And some people have speculated, as I have, that it doesn't mean that they never had intercourse. So it seems to be implying that by his speech. I mean, I'm not arguing against that fact, but some people have insinuated that it's kind of like, for those of you who've been married for a long time, you'll know what I'm talking about. You hopefully you love your spouse. I love my spouse, and I find her to be beautiful. But there are moments where you're like, "Yo, I really love you." Like, I know I've said that a lot, but I love you, and you really mean it. And or sometimes you're like, you're really beautiful. You just have to stop and tell them, like, "You're really beautiful," you know? It doesn't mean that you didn't feel that way yesterday, but there's like a deeper realization. So a lot of people feel like what's happening here is that he's having this deeper revelation or understanding of one of those spousal moments of like, "Dang, you're really good looking, and this is going to cause some problems down the road." All right. This is what we read of the same account in Jasher. And Abram and Sarai were walking at the border of the brook Mitzrayim. And Abram beheld his woman, Sarah, I'll just say Sarah, and that she was very beautiful. And Abram said to his woman Sarah, "Since Elohim has created you with such a beautiful countenance, I am afraid the Mitzrayim, lest they should slay me and take you away, for the fear of Elohim is not in these places. Surely then," and we saw the account earlier that he attests that even the sons of Shem there were not following Yahuwah. So they were still idolaters. There was no fear of Elohim there. They didn't have the moral values. "Surely then you shall do this. Say you are my sister to all that they may ask you, in order that it may be well with me, and that we may live and not be put to death." All right. So, and as I was saying, many have claimed that Abraham or Abram never noticed the beauty of Sarah until this very moment. And I could see it both ways. And earlier in the book of the writings of Abraham, which, by the way, I do think is the best. Um, when it says that Abraham wrote a book, I think that this is it. And I'm going to give you a reason why in a little bit, why this actually matches up eerily with the Dead Sea Scrolls. The writings of Abraham came about in the 1800s. It was a post mud flood document, like so many of the others. It just came out of the blue. It came out on the markets. And many people say it's a forgery. Well, if it's a forgery, it's a little bit odd because, again, the Dead Sea Scrolls were found to have some parallel passages which are not seen in any other books. So that's just really eerie. Well, this is how he describes her upon meeting her in the city of Ur. Now, remember, he goes back to Ur and he sees her, and this is how he describes her. It's a pretty forward. Now, among the believers were Lot and the son of Haran, and Haran's daughters, Milcah and Sarah. Milcah was fair, but Sarah was beautiful above all women. Her face was that of an angel filled with light. Her cheeks as two roses in full bloom. Her hair is spun gold, which men treasure above all. So he's saying here that she has blonde hair, she has gold hair. Her eyes as pools of blue reflecting the glory of Elohim's sky. So he's saying that her eyes are the color of the firmament. Her nose delicate and lovely, and her countenance truly was fair as the sun. Her well, hold on to something or a loved one here. Her breast like two mountains rising above the plains of Shinar were fair to behold. Yes, he just referred to them as two mountains rising above the plains of Shinar. And her complexion truly like the clouds in purity. I think this like would cause Solomon to blush. Her arms were comely, her hands perfect and delightful to behold, always in the service of those in need and quick to hasten to the service of Yahuwah, her Elohim, or Yahuwah Elohika. Her palms were lovely, unmarred by her constant labor, her fingers long and slender. Her feet were comely and always set in the path of truth. Her thighs were well rounded and soft, yet never failing to sustain her in her labor of love in behalf of the servants of Elohim. Truly, no maiden was fairer than Sarah, the daughter of Haran, for her beauty was greater than all other women, and she excelled them all. And that's not uncommon in scripture to talk about, that there's like these women like Esther and others that were just like drop dead gorgeous and they loved Yah and the Aseneth was or Aseneth was another one and all the kings of the earth would fight over them. But with her beauty was great wisdom and perfect faith in Yahuwah and constant service in behalf of the saints. For her hands never ceased from blessing the people of Elohim. Wherefore my brother Nahor took Milcah. It doesn't explain why Nahor took Milcah, but the daughter of Haran to wife. But I, Abram, took Sarah at the direction of Yahuwah, and I found great joy in her. That's a beautiful passage. And if you're paying attention, there's two things that are happening. There's two ways he's describing her, and I'm going to return to those because we'll also see how Pharaoh describes her, and it's only half of what Abraham describes her as. All right, so let's describe Tales of the Patriarchs. Now, if you guys don't know, Tales of the Patriarchs was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it is such an important document to some of the Hebrew thinking and also how it backs up some of these other books that we're reading. And this is how she is described by two, oh, the men describe her to Pharaoh, all right, in the Tales of the Patriarchs. It says the men returned to Pharaoh and described Sarah's features. They said she had beautiful face, supple hair, lovely eyes, pleasant nose, radiant face. He continued on describing her shapely breasts. So, two different accounts talks about her shapely breasts, perfect hands, and everything down to her long and delicate fingers. The men compared her to and rated her far higher than virgins and birds and all other women alike. That's a pretty hard to that's a raised bar right there. Hearing this and then seeing Sarah, the Pharaoh wanted her and took her for his wife. It says Sarah saved me by telling Pharaoh that I was her brother, and that night I and my nephew Lot cried together. So interesting that in Tales of the Patriarch it says the Lot and Abraham got together and wept and cried all through the night, which is also what Writings of Abraham says. So this is again how she is described to Pharaoh, I think, so remember, it's Pharaoh's men that sees her, and this is how they describe her now in writings of Abraham. I'm going to tie all this together. When the men departed from me, they went directly into the presence of Pharaoh, and when they had eaten with him, he had good wine brought forth. While they drank together, they began to speak unto him of what had transpired, but all they could speak of were the beauties of Sarah. So, I mean, like Pharaoh's getting drunk, and they're just talking about, like, dude, like the most beautiful woman you could ever imagine has just come into your kingdom, and she's got no husband, and then they start to describe her, and Pharaoh was like, "Bring her to me. I want her as a wife." And this is how they describe her: "How beautiful is the woman Sarah," they said, "who sitteth at Abram's right hand. How comely is the shape of her face. How delicate and fine spun are her tresses. How beautiful her eyes. How delicate is her nose, and the whole luster of her countenance. How fair are her breasts, and how comely withal is her complexion. How comely, too, are her arms, and how perfect her hands. How pleasing are her hands to behold, how lovely her palms, how long and slender her fingers. How comely are her feet, how well rounded her thighs. None of the maidens and none of the brides that enter the bride chamber are fairer than she. How her beauty is greater than all other women, and she excels them all." Sounds like Helen of Troy here. "Moreover, along with all this beauty, she hath great wisdom, and the workmanship of her hands is fair indeed." When he heard these words, Pharaoh lusted after Sarai. Essentially, it says lusted. And I'm going to talk about why all those descriptions they gave is descriptions of lust versus how Abraham described her. "And he sent his servants to fetch her to him. Knowing it to be the will of Yahuwah, I let her go, although mine heart was grieved within me. When Pharaoh saw her, his lust grew within him, for he was overcome by her beauty. And he took her into his household as his wife, and sent men to slay me, that I might not rise up to claim her. But Sarah, seeing these things, said unto Pharaoh, He is but my kinsman. Wherefore Pharaoh called back his men, and my life was spared." So, physically speaking, there's a defining difference between the two accounts. Abram described her face as that of an angel filled with light. And it's real important to see in here how he defines light. He describes the light of men as darkness, but the light of Elohim to be darkness to men. Right? And no, we're not confusing this with Charlie's Angels either, the face of an angel. Sexy supermodels do not, quote unquote, hasten to the service of Yahuwah, nor are their feet, quote unquote, always set on the path of truth. And truth is always used interchangeably with the Torah. Their thighs are not a labor of love in behalf of the servants of Elohim. Do you see what's happening here? And when do their hands never cease from blessing the people of Elohim? So a true Hebrew recognizes the difference between the two. All right. Yahuwah's angels versus bra modeling angels. One is set apart while the other is, well, sexy and unclean. Though undoubtedly, while crossing the river into Egypt with Sarah, his woman, uh, the makeup wearing kind of woman was dutifully on Abram's mind. All right. No, I'm not trashing or taking the baseball bat out on makeup here. Okay, but um, so before moving on to my next point, I just want to make clear here that Abraham had all the same physical descriptions of her as Pharaoh. The one difference is that you see in the two texts I read, the Tales of the Patriarchs and the Writings of Abraham, they had nothing to say about her service to Yahuwah, or how she blesses the saints and how she works for so on and so forth. It was all lustful. Whereas Abraham's like, look, she's beautiful, and her breasts are like the mountains of rising above the plains of Shinar, whatever. But that's secondary to look at. She is a woman of Elohim, and that's what I love about her. All right. Now, while crossing into Egypt, Abram was likely afraid of the stories of the Watchers would be repeated. Now, I saw a comment in here about the mighty men, and that's actually a really good comparison. So, one of the things that has been long commented on is how Genesis 12 perfectly lines up with Genesis 6. And so Moshe, as he's writing this, is he wants you to think about the mighty men, or the Watchers, or the sons of Elohim, in Genesis 6. So let's read these side by side. This is Genesis 12:14 through 15. This is what it says. And it came to pass that when Abram was come into Mitzrayim, the Mitzrayim beheld the woman that she was very fair. The princess also of Pharaoh saw her and commanded her before Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. Well, this is what Genesis 6 says. And it came to pass, same word, and it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth and daughters were born to them, that the sons of Elohim saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them women all which they chose. So a very similar situation is being played out here that Abraham sees that just like with the watchers or the sons of Elohim experience in Genesis 6, they're going to come in and they're just going to take any woman they want and kill the husband, which is what they tried to do. All right. Now, here's where I want to compare the writings of Abraham with the tales of the patriarchs. Again, the tales of the patriarchs would not come out of the Dead Sea Scrolls until 1948. All right, and Rise of Abraham came back in the 1800s. There is no other text that I have found that have these two stories. The comparison is it's unparalleled, and it just shows further affirms to me that the writings of Abraham is not a forgery. No way, no how. So this is what we read in the writings of Abraham. But on the night before I entered Egypt, I dreamed a dream. All right. So this is, they're about ready to cross the river, and he's about to look at her ankles and say, wow, those are beautiful ankles. And behold, in my dream, I saw a cedar and a palm tree, and the branches of the palm tree were wrapped around the cedar. Suddenly, a group of men approached, seeking to cut down the cedar and leave the palm tree to stand alone. But the palm tree cried out, saying, cut not down the cedar, for whosoever seeketh to fell it shall find the curse of Elohim resting upon him. So the men desisted, and the cedar was spared by the act of the palm tree. The writings of Abraham, chapter 61. Now let's compare this with Tales of the Patriarchs. I, Abraham, built an altar at Bethel and called to Elohim, praising him. And I should point out that the Tales of the Patriarchs is kind of like a stitching quilt, similar to Genesis, where it takes the accounts of the first-hand accounts of the different patriarchs and it puts them into one story. It's a really neat little narrative if you haven't read it. I then went to the holy mountain and to Hebron. So that actually affirms the writings of Abraham. He went to the holy mountain first. Genesis doesn't say that, but Tales of the Patriarch does. And to Hebron, where he lived for 2 years. Now, this is 2 years versus 3. So a little bit of a difference on the date, but I'll let that slide because that's interesting. They're pretty close to each other. Because there was famine in the land, my family and I traveled to Egypt where grain was plentiful. I went across the branches of the Nile to enter Egypt, the land of the sons of Ham, which also the writings of Abraham talks about how it's the land of Ham. I had a dream about a cedar tree and a date palm tree. There it is. When people came to cut down the cedar tree, the date palm tree objected, saying that they were grown from a single root. The tree was spared. I became fearful of the dream and told it to my wife. I explained it as it pertained to us, telling Sarah that the men will come for her and try to kill me. I warned Sarah that she must tell everyone that I am her brother so that my life can be spared. She became scared and did not want to go to there for fear of being seen. It's called Zoan. I don't know what that is. I think that's maybe a city in Egypt, Zoan. 5 years later, counselors of the Egyptians' court and advisors of the Pharaoh of Zoan came. 5 years later, guys, 5 years. They were in Egypt for 5 years before this happened, before they recognized her. Having heard the words of my wife, they brought gifts and requested knowledge from me. I read to them from the book of the words of Enoch. It's interesting. So he had the book of Enoch with him. All right. So that's that there. Now, well, you know what? That's probably a good cutoff place. I want to talk about the plague next time, and I'm going to hand it back to you, Michael, and it's all yours.
All right, good stuff. I love the connection with Genesis 6. That was really good. I guess I should finish. Yeah, I guess I'll just finish and let you get last word, and then we'll hand it up for comments. So I want to talk about the wife-sister narrative. John brought it up in the comments, and this was the first of 3. So I'm going to post it here, but I just want to read this little commentary. At the core of each of this story of a biblical patriarch who has come to be in the land of a powerful foreign overlord who misidentifies the patriarch's wife as the patriarch's sister, and consequently attempts to wed her himself. The overlord later finds out his error. Two of the three stories are similar in many other details, including the ruler's name, Abimelech. So put that here. So no color. There's some blue in there, but so again, we just read it here. First episode of this is Abraham, Sarah, and Pharaoh. The next one is 8 chapters later. So Abraham is immigrating to the region of Gerar, whose king is named Abimelech. Abraham states that Sarah, his wife, is really his sister, leading Abimelech to try to take Sarah as a wife. However, Yah intervened before he touched Sarah. Abimelech complains, and then that's where it says he's the half sister. Abimelech then restores Sarah to Abraham and gives him gifts of livestock by way of an apology, and allows him to reside there. Abimelech also gives 1,000 pieces of silver to Abraham to reprove Sarah by covering of the eyes. And then the other one is Isaac. So Isaac and Abimelech. In order to avoid a famine, he immigrates to the southern region of Gerar, whose king is named Abimelech. Isaac has been told to do so by God, who also orders him to avoid Egypt and promised to fulfill him to the fulfillment of the oath he made with Abraham. He states that Rebekah is his wife, but it's really his sister. And he is worried that the Philistines will otherwise kill him in order to marry Rebekah. After a while, Abimelech sees Isaac sporting with Rebekah and states that she must be Isaac's wife rather than his sister. He orders that Rebekah be left alone on the pain of his death. He spends a year in the area and becomes wealthy. So again, what do you guys make of that? This wife-sister narrative, there's obviously a pattern. What do you guys make of that? I didn't get a chance to really dig deep on and to theorize why he keeps repeating that. Can you think of any kind of esoteric reason? I don't know. Okay, so now for an interesting I found here. So the Masoretic. So I've been always going back and forth during the study between the Masoretic and the Septuagint. Those of us post-Millers, we know Septuagint has a different timeline than the Masoretic, 500 years or so. And, it links up with the Adamic literature and all that. And this guy is interesting because if we're post-Mill and we know the deception that's all around us, and what happened in 1948, guys? Well, according to the Masoretic, Abraham was born 1948 years after Adam. Okay. There's also a 2008 date, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But 2008, a lot like Skiba, a lot of people also came in the Torah in 2008. I didn't, but I came into truth in 2008. That exact year, I started seeing the scales were lifted. And so here's what this commentary says. Because the Jews have wrongly believed from 300 BC to the present that Terah was 70 years old when Abraham was born, instead of the correct begetting age of 130, you must add 60 years to the flood date of 2458 to arrive at that flood date. So that's where there's a 1948 date and a 2008 date with the Masoretic. So let me show this here. This is where they get this is where they get that date. So if you take that to Abraham, it's 2008. And then what I just said about adding the 60 years, it was 1948. Okay. And then you have to figure if we're post-Mill and the enemy's trying to screw with us, and a lot of people know the Masoretic. They know Abraham was born 1948 years after Abram. That's one of their proof texts that we're getting close to the end times. I don't know. Could be the Masoretic. But Septuagint obviously would disagree. So here is the Septuagint years. And when you do that, it comes out to 3,388. I don't know what to make of that, but it's just way off from the Masoretic. But that 1948 really stick out. Hopefully that will help you guys do more research and maybe we can come to a better conclusion. But for me, when I saw that, I was like, whoa, that's the deception. That's a deception right there. Okay, so finally, this will be my last thing, but it's rather long. So last week I talked a little bit about the similarities between Abraham and the Israelites. So if you've been following the Genesis Targum, I've been doing Yeshua and Adam, Yeshua and Noah, Yeshua and Moses and Noah, the similarities. So now I'm going to talk about similarities between Abraham and the Israelites. And I kind of, my word study where it said Jacob built an altar and left his family. So that kind of was my first clue that there is similarities between Abraham and the Israelites. So here's the first one. Okay, so and there was famine in the land, the Israelites, for there was 2 years in famine in the land. Abraham went down to Egypt. Our fathers went down to Egypt to sojourn there, to sojourn in the land. Famine in that land. Um, Pharaoh drew near. It came to pass when he came near, and they will kill me, but you will keep me alive. Every son that is born you shall cast in the river, and every daughter you shall save alive. Say, I pray you, that you are my sister, that it may be well with you. And God dwelt with the midwives. Um, Came to pass when Abraham lived in Egypt, sons of Egypt came in Egypt. Pharaoh gave men charge concerning him, and they sent him away. And the Egyptians were urgent upon the people to send them out. Abraham was very rich in cattle and silver and gold, and the Israelites. And they went on their journey. These journeys are the children of Israel. Again, similar story. Keep telling the same thing. And then finally, or no, two left. This is more similarities. Um, Abraham and the Israelites. So you are the Lord God who did choose Abraham and brought him forth out of the Ur of Chaldees and gave him the name Abraham. And then in Deuteronomy, for you are a holy people, for the Lord your God, and the Lord has chosen you to be his own treasure. Genesis 12:1, go for yourself. Exodus 3:17. I'll bring you out, I guess. I will bless you and make your name great. The Lord bless you and keep you, the Israelites. I will make you a great nation, Deuteronomy 4:8. And what great nation is there? Abraham was a unique one. Who is like your nation Israel? There was a famine in the land, the famine in the land. Abraham went down to Egypt. Joseph's 10 brethren went down to buy grain from Egypt. The Egyptians harassed Abraham. The Egyptians harassed the Israelites. The kings joined forces against Abraham. Same in Israel. God fought Abraham's foes, and then we know what they did in Egypt. That was pretty cool. And finally, the last thing I have on 12. Hopefully, this isn't repetitive. Might be. So, there it is. Okay, so yeah, famine, family. Sarah became property. Israelis, Pharaoh. Israelites became slaves to Pharaoh. God sends plagues. Pharaoh sends Abraham and Sarah away. And Pharaoh sends the Israelites away. Pharaoh gives Abraham wealth. Egyptians give wealth to the Israelites. Again, there's so many connections. Noel and I were messaging earlier this week about how deep the first 10 chapters were, and look at all these connections just within the first 10 chapters of the repetitiveness that he's just trying to make a point. He's setting the foundation. The Torah is the foundation for the rest of the Bible. That's all I got on chapter 12. I will hand it back off to Noel.
Yeah, we were commenting, and I've said this to the group before, that the first 6 chapters of Genesis are a nightmare for any Torah portion because it's the first Torah portion. We're about to roll back the scroll right after Sukkot. It's coming up for most of us if you're not in it already, and it's like it took us at least 6 weeks to get through the first 6 chapters, maybe 7. And so we would only be like at this point in chapter 12, probably like 3 Torah portions in. I mean, it's tough going through all this material in like 1 or 2 weeks like this. But anyways, thanks for your patience, everybody, as we go through this. I do have a lot more material to cover, and it's specifically my last go around. I talked about Sarah's beauty. Well, I'll be talking about another uh, deeply intimate subject. So hide your kids. We will be talking about the plague in Egypt. And what is the plague in Egypt? This is what it says in verse 17. And the word of Yahuwah sent great plagues against Pharaoh and the men of his house on account of Sarah, Abram's wife. Now, specifically, these plagues are connected to Sarah. So think about that. You think about it when if Michael and I make it all the way to the Exodus event, I imagine we'll talk about the 10 plagues of Egypt and how each of these 10 plagues were directly corresponding with a specific god or Elohim. So what god or Elohim would these plagues have? I wonder if it has anything to do with the obelisk. So let's go ahead and get into this. All right. And so um, uh, let's see. This is what Jubilee says. Let's see if Jubilees gives us any hints here about this, what the plague is. And I'm just gonna guess at this point. It has something to do with the Horus and um, the obelisk and all that fun stuff. Osiris. And it came to pass when Pharaoh seized Sarah, the woman of Abram, that Yahuwah plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarah, Abraham's woman. Again, we don't see what the great plagues are, but I'm assuming that it has something to do correlating with Sarah. So let's keep reading. This comes from Jasher. Let's see what this says. This comes from chapter 15. And the king approached to speak to Sarah, and he reached out his hand to touch her when the angel, so he's reaching out his hand to touch her sexually. He wants to make Sarah his wife, and it says when the angel smote him heavily. How was he smote heavily? And he was terrified, and he refrained from reaching to her. And when the king came near to Sarah, the angel smote him to the ground and acted thus to him the whole night, and the king was terrified. So the king, the Pharaoh, he keeps trying to go back to her all night. And there's an angel there in bed with Sarah, just smacking him silly the whole time. I mean, he's like he's like it's almost like a scene from like Ghost or something where like it's like someone's getting beaten up by a spirit and they don't have a clue what's going on, but the angel just smacking this guy. And the angel on the right, and the angel on that night smote heavily all the servants of the king. Oh, well, there's a further clue. And his whole household is being smote the same way on account of Sarah. And there was great lamentations that night amongst the people of Pharaoh's house. Now, I want you to think about this picture of great lamentation over the whole house of Pharaoh, which that's essentially what Pharaoh means, the house of, right? All right. So now let's read about what it says in Tales of the Patriarchs. Perhaps we can get more of a mental image of what this plague is. I pray to Yahuwah for justice. This is Abraham. I wanted Yahuwah to raise up against the Pharaoh and protect Sarah. Elohim listened and sent an evil spirit. Now, this is an evil spirit this time, to the entire household that prevented Pharaoh from having sexual relations with Sarah for the 2 years that they were together. What? It wasn't one single night. She was in his house for 2 entire years. At the end of the 2 years, the plagues and afflictions were so great that magicians and healers were sent for. They were, of course, ineffective, and they all soon left. Hi, Hyrcanos went to me pleading for help against the plague because I had been seen in a dream. I agreed to help only when my wife Sarah is returned to me. Then Pharaoh heard this and confronted me, himself asking why I lied, saying that Sarah was my sister. He agreed to give Sarah back, and I exorcise the evil spirit from the house of Pharaoh. Well, that's interesting because here you see in the Dead Sea Scrolls somebody apart from Solomon or who can exorcise demons. It has been stated that in the Dead Sea Scrolls, only Solomon could exorcise demons, but that's not true because right here we see that Abraham was able to do it, which was messianic in character. The Pharaoh swore to me that he had not touched Sarah while they were together and gave her gifts of gold, silver, linen, and purple dyed clothing. Sarah and I were then led out of Egypt. I, Sarah, Lot, and his wife took out flocks and gold and silver I had received and traveled together. So they left Egypt filthy, stinking rich with the treasury of Egypt. So it says right there, the purpose of the plague was to keep Pharaoh from having sexual relations with Sarah. We're getting warmer. Can you name me something else that would keep his sexual urges at bay? It's not like chlamydia would stop him. Many will claim the texts are in disagreement as an evil spirit cannot possibly be the angel. Is that so? Certainly, a demon and an angel are two very separate entities indeed. Well, then consider that multiple plagues are being described. The angel could very well have inflicted one plague, while an evil spirit was committed to the task of keeping Pharaoh from being able to perform over those so many years. After all, erectile dysfunction doesn't exactly cry out terror, does it? Or perhaps it does. I just named it. Depending upon the man, I suppose. You will tell me, uh, before anyone here claims that an angel and a demon would not be working together, then recall who set about to commit the greatest plague upon Egypt of all. The angel of death was in service of Yahuwah. I mean, that's something to think about. And who was he again? Well, my thought is that Satan. Satan is the angel of death. All right, so let's see how the writings of Abraham describes the same scene. I told you guys to hide your children because this is just goes on and on and on. It doesn't end. All right, this is how the same scene is described. And Elohim hearkened into my prayer and withheld his ruach from the Egyptians, that none of them were able to come at their wives that night. So nobody in Egypt. So remember when I told you the great lamenting and mourning all over Egypt? They were more they you could hear the mourns and the laments going up into the night because nobody, it was like a chorus of men crying because they were unable to come at their wives. In the morning, consternation reigned throughout the land of Egypt, for no man had been able to lie with his wife all that night. Pharaoh also was greatly perplexed, for although his lust towards Sarah had grown throughout the night, he had been unable to satisfy that lust. All right, let me repeat that. He was unable to satisfy that lust because of the curse of Elohim which rested upon him. Therefore, he summoned all of his wise men and the physicians of his household, but none could heal him, and all had suffered the same affliction. So even the wizards and magicians, they had erectile dysfunction. Every single one of them. They were unable to complete the task because they couldn't get it up. And there you go. So it's just interesting because it's like the obelisk is like the like how every Disney theme park has like its emblem. It has like a spaceship Earth or the castle or the Tree of Life or whatever. Like the emblem, if Egypt were a amusement park, it would be the obelisk. That would be the emblem. And it was the night that the obelisk went limp. So that was probably more than you guys were expecting, but anyways, in a conclusion, now if only somebody would make the monument in Washington D.C. Just as lifelike as what we saw in Egypt. And that's it for my commentary on the night. But yeah, that was quite the interesting plague. And she was there for like 2 years, and they kept going at it. And anyways, that's it. Michael, did you have anything else to add?
No, nope, all good.
All right, you guys were having fun in the chat with that. So, does anyone have any comments? I had said, at the beginning of the night to take notes and to let me know what your thoughts were. So, did anyone take any notes? Did anyone have any questions, added observations? I'm handing it over to you guys.
Yeah, I often wondered about the thing with Sarah and Pharaoh because for some reason I was under the assumption that he was having sex with her and that would have been adultery in one, if not more, forms than one. But now that's been completely clarified and I understand. So thank you very much for that.
One thing I'll be talking about over the next few weeks is how absolutely incredible that here going into like the serpent seed debate, you have this promise of a Messiah that's going to come through a pure line. And it's promised to come through Abraham. And over and over and over again, and like Michael already brought up, his wife gets passed to two different kings, Abimelech and Pharaoh. And this is, Satan trying to get his seed into Sarah. I mean, think about that. That's what Satan's trying to do. He's trying to get his seed into Sarah. He's trying to create another Cain. He can't do it. He's incapable of it. Like Yahuwah steps in this time and he's like, okay, I allowed it with Adam and Eve in the garden. I'm not allowing it this time. I'm coming through with my end of the deal, and you're not stopping me, Satan. And you're going to see him, just like hand the keys over to Eliezer, who is the son. Some versions say grandson of Nimrod, who was a descendant of Ham. Like Nimrod, a son of Nimrod would have been given the kingdom. And time and again, Yahuwah's like, nope, nope, nope. I'm going to give you a son. I know you can't see it, but it's going to happen through Sarah. So we'll be seeing that over the next coming weeks.
I really like the part, when you're equating Sarah's beauty, the difference between Sarah's beauty that Abraham was seeing and the beauty that Pharaoh was seeing, like the lust of the world to the lust of, or to like the appreciation of a man having a godly wife. It reminded me of the Proverbs 31 wife, where it talked about, the charm of is deceitful, but the beauty is vain, and a woman who can fear it, who fears Yahweh, shall be praised. And I think that we are attracted, or men are attracted to women who do fear Yahweh, and that because there is such a righteousness there that their beauty exudes them, even in their old age, that they just have this aura about them. But it also reminded me of the story of Joseph, because it's also said that Joseph was a super handsome man, and that But I've seen the difference between how Sarah was going into with Pharaoh, and Joseph was the one that had to kind of stand up against it, where Yahweh was fighting on Sarah's behalf, and Joseph had to make that stand. I think there's the difference of a man like taking that stand against that and saying no, like I'm fearing Yahweh in that, and suffered the consequences of being thrown in prison and everything of that, and just the lies. But I just thought that was a really good comparison.
Thank you.
No, what did you think about the 1948 thing? Have you heard about that before? And anything to add there?
Yeah, and just to be clear, you were saying that 1948 according to the LXX, right? According to that.
No, it's the Masoretic.
Oh, to the Masoretic.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. And okay, so yeah, I mean, obviously they craft these years very carefully. I mean, just give everyone an example. It was brought up in our group. It was astonishing when I saw it that the moon landing, the Apollo 11 moon landing, was exactly 66 years after the Wright brothers. So there's no doubt in my mind that they're creating these events based on years. And as you guys know, I go by the LXX timeline. It wouldn't have detoured me either way. Like if it was LXX or Masoretic in the 1940, it doesn't really matter to me. But uh, clearly, it would still be just as construed either way, if that makes sense to you guys. And whether it's the years are a lie or a true, they're still creating events based on the math. So that was really interesting, Michael. Thanks for bringing that up.
Anybody else have anything?
Going once, going twice, going thrice. Nothing. Okay, then we are going to officially close. Thank you all for coming here and listening to our presentations and Michael's research and my own. I loved it tonight that we Michael and I commented on two completely different facets of the first same chapter. And I love that we can do that. And sometimes we cover the same things, and sometimes not. I had a feeling tonight. I just had this feeling like we were not going to touch on anything the same, and it turned out to be the case. So, with that, let's close, and I'll see you guys next Sabbath. And just so you guys know, too, everyone who is here currently, I had to push off next Thursday's presentation the following week. I was going to be talking on the Black Dahlia hoax, which I'm really looking forward to give. And the reason being is I'm apparently on a book tour now, and I'm I was invited on to Take on the World to talk about the Earth, Not a Globe review, which Rebecca, I teamed up with Rebecca to edit. She did the heavy lifting on that, of course, and we released it recently. I was on Zen Show this last Thursday talking about it. So I'll be on Take on the World really late too. They like to party late there. I won't be starting until 10 o'clock, which is way past my bedtime. It's not even 10 o'clock here yet on the East Coast, so I would not have even been starting this next Thursday. But anyways, that's what I'll be doing, and look forward to seeing you guys this next week, and of course next Sabbath I'll be doing Romans chapter 6, part 2, and assuming we'll be doing probably chapter 13 of the Targum. So, good night, everybody. Shabbat Shalom one last time.